Hello and welcome to Between the Tackles. I'm Doug Kide, this is Zach Cox, and Kayla Vernava usually would be sitting somewhere around this desk. But the Boston Bruins made the playoffs, which is great news for everyone, but it means that she cannot join us. So it is kind of a football word edition of Between the Tackles that we're doing
It's a
today.
nice little medley.
Yes.
We're mixing things up by keeping things the same.
Yeah, exactly. Might be a little longer than the football word, but we'll see. First things first, let's talk a little bit about Richard Sherman.
Let's do it.
Things have changed even since we've created this little outline for our show. Tommy Curran, seems like he gets a weekly mention on our shows at this point. He reported that the Patriots are not interested in trading for Richard Sherman. This comes a couple days after Jeff Howe reported that the Patriots could still be interested in trading for Sherman if they wound up moving on from Malcolm Butler. So I guess we're kind of right back where we started with this. I mean, I guess things could potentially change if the Patriots do elect to trade Malcolm Butler, but for now it seems like don't expect Sherman on the Patriots.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we stand right now, at least according to these reports. Yeah. And looking back over Jeff Howe's report from yesterday, I think it wasn't as strong. I think a lot of people took it as the Patriots are still currently interested in trading for Richard Sherman. It's not exactly what he said. He said they still have some interest, but they wouldn't become real players unless they do end up trading Malcolm Butler, which still could happen. So maybe if they do trade Malcolm Butler, then they become big players again. But yeah, as of right now, it looks like Richard Sherman is not coming here, which probably means that it's a pretty good chance that Malcolm Butler is staying here.
Yeah, I think that it's looking more and more that way, at least. I mean, I still think that there's a possibility that he could be moved. But at this point, it almost seems like there's more of a possibility that the Seahawks will trade Richard Sherman than the Patriots will trade Malcolm Butler, which is
really
strange.
Weird. Yeah, the comments from both Sherman himself and John Schneider, John Schneider, the GM out there in Seattle, have been very candid about this situation. Yeah. Typically, teams don't discuss openly trading players before they're actually traded, but they've both said. John Schneider said, yeah, like everything you've heard is true. We have had these conversations, and Richard Sherman admitted as well that their conversations have been had. So it's a very bizarre situation, especially for such a marquee player. Yeah,
I'm trying to find the report right now, but there was a report from someone, I think it might have been Sheila Campanata from ESPN, who said that the Seahawks aren't just fielding calls about Sherman, they're actually making calls about Sherman. So it seems like they kind of want to get a deal done here at some point, whether that's, I don't know who that would be with it at this point, but I mean, honestly, wouldn't it make sense for the Saints to just swing a deal for Richard Sherman? I know that Michael Lombardi mentioned that a few weeks ago, but why go after this guy where there's so many, things that you have to go through just in order to trade for him, then get him signed, like there is with Malcolm Butler. First he has to sign the tender, then they have to agree to a deal, then the Patriots and States. If Richard Sherman is out there for the right price, which could actually wind up being cheaper than Malcolm Butler, might as well just do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think they're comparable players, but I think if you ask most people which player would you rather have right now, I think most people would rather have Richard Sherman. Yeah. And with the Seahawks really, their kind of desire to trade him, or I guess at least desire to see what they can get for him, I think you would definitely be able to get him cheaper than you'd be able to get Malcolm Butler from the Patriots, especially with all the RFA nonsense that the hoops you'd have to jump through there. So, yeah, it sounds like there's a very, very strong possibility that Richard Sherman could be moved, which is kind of crazy considering that I didn't even view that as a possibility a week or two ago.
No, it's pretty wild. I was actually having this conversation with my buddy Nick Underhill. He's been on our shows before. I've been talking to him a lot because of the whole Malcolm Butler thing. He's a reporter for the Saints. He asked me, who would you rather have between Malcolm Butler and Richard Sherman? Who would be worth more in a trade? And I kind of went back and forth a little bit, but I guess it would be Butler because he's 2 years younger. If you do trade for Malcolm Butler, then you will probably also be signing him to a long-term contract. If you're trading for Richard Sherman, he's 29 years old. He's 2 years older. He's only got 2 years left on that contract. So sure, you could extend him at some point, but he also did show slight signs of taking a step backward.
This year was probably his worst year
since his rookie year.
Not that he was bad by any means. I mean, he was still a Pro Bowler, still a very good player, but definitely a slight step back from 14-15.
Yeah, so if Butler's going to cost you a first-round pick, and if the Seahawks could unload Richard Sherman for basically anything, I think you take Sherman in that situation because there's a lot less that you have to go through. But I guess for now, we should probably prepare to have Malcolm Butler back next season with the Patriots. Things could still change on that front. You know, once he signs that tender, that's when things really start to get moving. But yeah, for now, that's kind of what we're looking at. Butler, not Sherman, and then you've got Eric Rowe and Stephon Gilmore in there. Still not sure who's going to play the slot, but someone will, right?
Someone's got to step up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted a player at that position too at some point in the mid-rounds, which we can get to later with their whole how their draft situation is comprised right now. They still don't pick until pick number 72.
Right.
But if they do decide to trade Malcolm Butler, that will probably change. But if they don't, then it's going to be kind of hard for them to climb up into those first 2 rounds.
Definitely. Now what should we talk about? Should we talk about off-season moves or Tony Romo? I guess let's get into Romo.
Yeah, let's hit Romo.
Just hit this real quick. Tony Romo is stepping away from the NFL. I guess he's not officially using the word retirement.
I think in his hour, I believe he talked for almost an hour and a half. He talked for a very long time on the conference call with reporters. His CBS introductory conference call. He didn't say retirement once.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but they said he was asked repeatedly, are you retiring? Are you done? He said, I believe he said, I can't envision myself coming back, but you never say never. Something to that extent.
Weird move. Well, first of all, it does have implications for the AFC because teams like the Houston Texans, like the Denver Broncos, I guess won't be starting the season with Tony Romo as their quarterback. Since he's not using that word retirement, then I guess he could come back at some point. But this seems like a weird move for CBS.
Seems like a very weird move all around.
To add him, take out Phil Simms, who I don't think anyone's really missing Phil Simms other than maybe like Chris Simms or other Matt Simms, Phil Simms' wife maybe. But because he's really been very poor as a color commentator for the last few years. But to replace Phil Simms, bring in Tony Romo, and to basically include as part of his contract, oh yeah, you can go play football again if you want. What happens at that point to Jim Nantz and whoever's sitting next to him in the booth? Do they just bring back Phil Simms and bring in the next guy?
He's not going to be doing Jaguars Titans. Right, he's in the number 1 team, and he's in the number 1 CBS broadcast team, which is wild to think that a guy who literally has never really done, he's never done play-by-play, or he's not going to be doing play-by-play, but he's never done in-game analysis, any of that kind of stuff. And it's crazy that they would, obviously Phil Simms gets a lot of hate, and well-deserved, I think. I think that he had really taken a downslide the last couple of years. But to take a complete broadcast rookie and put him in there, like, I mean, Tony Romo seems like a nice guy. He seems like a guy who will be good at TV at some point. He's obviously very smart about the game. But I don't look at him and say, this guy's a slam dunk A-plus commentator, especially right away. Like, nobody jumps right into I think Peter King wrote about this a bunch in his big column the other day, that nobody, even like Boomer Esiason, Chris Collinsworth, Phil Simms, the guys who have risen to these top levels, they start kind of either in studio or they start at a lower level and kind of work their way up. Tony Romo's getting thrown into the fire right now. And with CBS, if he does decide to leave, then what, do they just have Phil Simms just like hanging out in the back room until he leaves and be like, all right, Phil, you're back in. Come on.
They just bring him to the stadium with Tony Romo just in case Tony Romo decides
he's like his
suit up that
he's like his alternate or something.
Yeah, it's very strange. I don't know how many implications this has for Jimmy Garoppolo, because the teams that Romo was rumored to go to were like the Texans, the Broncos, teams I mentioned, teams that the Patriots probably would not have been willing to trade Garoppolo to, just because that would have made them so much better. But, I guess it could have a slight trickle-down effect if those teams sign quarterbacks and then the Browns don't get them and all sorts of stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm still not expecting Jimmy Garoppolo to be traded, even after this Romo news, but it's something that we just kind of have to continuously keep in the back of our minds, and we'll have to even beyond this year, because even if they keep him for next year, then they could franchise him and trade him. So this is a topic that we will be talking about until he leaves.
Until he is no longer, until he either signs a long-term contract with the Patriots or is no longer part of the Patriots. I don't really think, I agree there. I don't think the Romo news has a huge implication on Jimmy Garoppolo, because if the Patriots aren't willing to let him go to the terrible Cleveland Browns for a very, very high draft pick, I can't see any way they'd let him go to basically a contender. I'd say both the Texans and the Broncos give them a decent quarterback, and they're a legit Super Bowl contender, both of those teams with the defenses that they have. I can't see the Patriots, I mean, plus neither of them have nearly the draft assets that the Browns do. So I can't see the Patriots trading who they believe could be their future franchise quarterback to a rival for less than they could get for trading him to a bottom feeder. It just doesn't make any sense.
It would have to be so many first-round picks from the Texans or the Broncos that it would be something that they probably would not be willing to do. But I don't know what the Texans think they're doing this year because
Tom Savage, baby.
They could have been contenders. They could have been Super Bowl contenders this season. They were really good last year with the quarterbacks that they had. Now Tom Savage is their #1 quarterback. Who's their backup right now? It's
Brandon Weeden.
Brandon Weeden. I mean,
the legend. Yeah.
They've obviously got to draft someone. Unless they have a lot of confidence in Tom Savage. But if they had a lot of confidence in Tom Savage, he would have started last year.
Everybody in this draft, too, it's kind of the consensus that there's no quarterback here that can step in and be a starting quarterback
right away. Not this year. It would have to be in the future.
So you're basically just hoping that Tom Savage becomes an above-average quarterback. And if not, you're just kind of washing the season away. Yeah, you're going to say, all right, cool, we'll be 9-7, win the AFC South, and then get smoked in the divisional round again.
I guess if the Texans start off, 1-3, 2-4 or something, then Tony Romo gets the call, might be willing to come in. But even then, I mean, Tony Romo, good quarterback, at times great quarterback. Bill O'Brien has a complex offense, and Brock Osweiler had a hard time learning it last year, and I don't know how easy of a time Tony Romo would have learning it mid-season, if that is the call that they have to make. So,
and speaking of, along those lines, I've heard the report, I believe it was from Ian Rappaport, I could be wrong on that Tony Romo is now every team's emergency quarterback. Pretty much that if a contender, say Atlanta Falcons or the Raiders or some team like that loses their quarterback midseason and they still want to make a Super Bowl push, they don't want to just give away their season, they're going to give Tony Romo a call. I think people overrate Tony Romo. I mean, I saw Adam Schefter say he's the most underrated quarterback in NFL history, which doesn't make any sense. I think he's overrated. He's won 2 playoff games. I think he's a good quarterback. I mean, obviously, Andre Cacciatore, one of our producers, is a Cowboys lifer. Don't
listen to this, Andre.
He's been preaching the book of Romo for years now. I think he's a good quarterback that could help a team. He's better than a lot of the current starting quarterbacks in the league, but he's not a savior by any means. He's not. Dude's won 2 playoff games in 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, he
gets hurt all the time, and he's 37, 38.
Yeah, he's getting way up there in age. Like you said, he's won 2 playoff games. There's all the fourth quarter collapses. I know that there's all the sorts of stats that say that he has just as many fourth quarter comebacks or twice as many, whatever it is. But, I mean, people don't make the jokes on Twitter about the fourth quarter collapses out of nowhere. It's not like we're all just bring them up out of thin air. The guy struggles in big moments, and that's why he's only won 2 playoff games. He really hasn't given the Cowboys a ton of success during his time there. So, no, I mean, yeah, he's a better option than probably a lot of teams' backups, and I guess I could see why he would be that emergency quarterback, but he's never won a Super Bowl. It's not like you can count on the guy to even win a playoff game. I don't know how many playoff losses he has, but
not all that. Well, he just hasn't made the playoffs all
right. That's the thing.
Obviously, the Cowboys were pretty bad for a good while, but if you're a good enough quarterback, you can kind of elevate your team there. I don't know. I think it's Tony Romo is. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I would like to have Tony. I would be confident having Tony Romo on my team as my quarterback. I would be okay with that. But I think he's being overrated both as a prospective commentator and as an actual NFL quarterback.
2-4, by the way, in the playoffs. So
2-4.
4 playoff losses.
No bueno.
Yeah, that's not good. And I mean, he's only made the playoffs once since 2009, and that was in 2014. So,
that was the Dez caught it.
That was the Dez caught it game. Let's move on to Patriots offseason moves. I might cough in a second, but it's just a warning for you guys.
It's all good.
I did a ranking of Patriots offseason moves, and I'll go through those real quick. My #1, there's the cough, was re-signing Dante Hightower. #2 was signing Stephon Gilmore. #3 was trading for Brandon Cooks. #4 was re-signing Daron Harmon. And #5 was trading for Dwayne Allen. You also contributed to this piece. Were there any there that glaringly stood out to you and you thought to yourself, this person that I work with is a moron. I don't know why I'm doing this to myself. I don't know why I have to hang out with him every day.
No.
That's good.
I went back through this, and the original plan was that you compile your top 5, I compile my top 5. And I looked back at it this morning, and mine was so close to what you had that I was just like, it's not worth it. I'll go with this for now. I say the top 3 on that list are kind of no-brainers. Hightower is obviously the #1. We said that would be their #1 priority. The fact that they could bring him back, huge, massively important. We've talked about that ad nauseum. Stephon Gilmore, Brandon Cooks, both way more high-profile acquisitions than I think anybody thought that they were going to make this offseason.
Absolutely.
Then after that, the final 2 I agree with. I probably would have put the same put the same order, but I can see this one changing a little bit.
Yeah.
I might have even put Alan Branch in where Deron Harmon is, because I think he's such an important part of that defensive line.
Definitely.
They've added Lawrence Guy too, which bolsters that, but I think Alan Branch is really the centerpiece of that D line. He's still playing great at above 30 years old.
Right.
I think it's really important they brought him back. And then Dwayne Allen, I would put Dwayne Allen or Rex Burkhead, both in that. It depends on how, I think hindsight might tell us how important the Rex Burkhead signing is, because he's all kind of, his signing's basically based on potential, which is a very big contract for a guy who really hasn't done a ton at the NFL level. I mean, they're paying him $3.15 million, most they've paid anybody, a running back since, I believe, 2010, 2009.
Yep, 2010.
And everything he's gotten rave reviews from everybody. Everybody that's discussed him, former coaches, scouts, everything. They believe he can be a very, very good running back. Yeah. So I think if he becomes that very, very good running back, then he's obviously might even bump up a little higher on that list. But
yeah, I think that
just the fact because they need to run especially if they don't bring LeGarrette Blount back, they needed somebody. They couldn't go into the season with Deion Lewis and James White as their two primary backs and then have the other guys below him.
I think even if he has, I mean, this might just be me defending my rankings at this point, but even if he has that 1,000-yard season with 10 touchdowns or whatever, I still do think it's easier to find a running back than it is to find, a free safety like Deron Harmon, a tight end who can just immediately contribute like Dwayne Allen, or even a defensive tackle like Alan Branch, because you see every year guys who get drafted and have 1,000-yard seasons. LeGarrette Blount even had a 1,000-yard season last year with 18 touchdowns. So they probably could have brought him back. I think that the Burkhead signing was great. I was one of the big proponents of it, but I would put that a little further down. I like the Branch pick that you had in there too, because it is so difficult to find a 6'5" guy who's 350 pounds who can move like Alan Branch. I think the Patriots' run defense probably would have been decent if Malcolm Brown and if Lawrence Guy and Vincent Valentine were their defensive tackles. But I was a huge proponent of re-signing Alan Branch too, so it's not like I'm discounting that or anything. And then trading for Coney Ealy, that's another big one that's not in the top 5, but I mean, I'm sure you could make an argument for it just because they have so few pass rushers. If they didn't trade for Coney Ealy, then you would be talking about, did I say Lawrence Guy earlier? I don't know. I'm rambling. But
there's a lot of guys in here. That's why.
If they didn't trade for Coney Ealy, then you would be talking about their top 2 pass rushers, or their top 3 pass rushers being Trey Flowers, Rob Ninkovich, and Geno Grissom. And you don't want to go into the draft with those 3 guys as your top pass rushers.
And I think this whole debate, the fact that we can really, you can almost make the case for any of these signings to be in the top 5, just shows how the Patriots really haven't made any move that you could really criticize all that much this summer. But both with the free agents they've signed, with the trades they've made, and with the guys that they've let go, with Martellus Bennett, Jabal Sheard, Barkevious Mingo, Logan Ryan. Even though some of those guys were very important players to this team, I think that the way that they were able to replace their production with some players that might even be better than those players, I think we said earlier, it's been a smash hit so far this offseason. Obviously, they still have work to do with Butler and everything regarding the draft, but so far you got to say it's an A+. It's pretty close at least.
Yeah, if you're looking just tit for tat right now and you're saying, okay, Coney Ealy for Jabal Sheard, that's pretty even. You're looking at Rex Burkhead for LeGarrette Blount, presumably that will be pretty even. But if they're able to keep Malcolm Butler for this season, and if you're comparing Stephon Gilmore to Logan Ryan, I think that that's a huge upgrade.
As much as we like Logan Ryan.
Right. I was a huge fan of Logan Ryan's game and as a human being, but no, Stephon Gilmore is a huge upgrade there. And then you throw Brandon Cooks in the mix, which at this point, you replace a first rounder with him, that's another huge upgrade. So one other transaction was made recently, or it was the only one that's been made recently. Before the Patriots re-signed Brandon Bolden, which is what I'm teasing at right now, they hadn't signed a player since Dante Hightower, which I believe was March 16th. It was 20 days ago. So, I mean, we've been a little bit bored, quite frankly. There hasn't been a whole lot going on as far as Patriots news goes. And when I saw the Brandon Bolden signing literally come across the wire, it was not announced, no one reported it before it was on the wire. It was like, all right, I have something to write about, even though it's just Brandon Bolden. But there's been a lot of questions of, okay, will the Patriots still sign LeGarrette Blount? Do they still need a running back since they brought back Brandon Bolden? I think the answer is yes. You don't want to go into the season. I guess they could go into the season with these running backs, because Dion Lewis can carry the ball between the tackles, and Brandon Bolden at least has the ability to do that. So I think, sure, they could go into the season with this, but I think you still want to draft a running back just to have that guy for the future, since Rex Burkhead's only on a 1-year deal right now.
Yeah, I agree, especially because Brandon Bolden, in years past, he was an occasional running back.
Yeah.
He would come in. I believe he got 100, 150 carries a year, something like that. Not a great amount. He was basically mostly a special teamer, primarily a special teamer, but he did have some time at running back. This year, I think he had 3 carries all season. He had 3 carries, fumbled 1, and then didn't play on offense the rest of the year. Obviously, they had a very deep group of running backs this year, but I don't think they are relying at all on Brandon Bolden from an offensive standpoint. Yeah. I think he's been a core special teamer for 5 or 6 years now. He's very popular in the locker room. He's a guy that everybody on the team loves. Yeah. And I haven't seen the details of his contract, but I'm sure it's very, very cheap. So I think that was – I don't even think bringing him back is going to have a huge impact on their mindset, their running back mindset. I think if they thought they needed another running back or two before they brought back Bolden, I think they still feel the same way, because Bolden is basically just a special teamer at this point. A very good one, but still a special teamer.
I think that they prefer, if it comes down to it, they prefer that he be a backup heading into a game rather than, because they've never relied on him really, I don't think, as a starter. Even
really
back
it was really just when people were getting hurt that he was kind of getting in there.
And he would go in mid-game, because even in 2015, they signed Steven Jackson to be their starting running back.
90-year-old Steven Jackson.
Rather than to use Brandon Bolden in that role. So I think that kind of goes to show that they want him to be a starter essentially on special teams, and if he has to contribute at running back mid-game, then he can. But even last year, running back group was very deep, but he barely got any play at all at running back. So I think that we are kind of seeing his role on offense go down, his role on special teams go up a little bit.
Also think this is going to have the inverse effect for Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead's been a big-time special teams player throughout his time with the Bengals. That was really his primary focus, was special teams. And people were curious when he was brought over how the Patriots would use him on offense and on special teams. He has a pretty big contract, so they're probably going to give him a lot of time on offense. And I think the fact they brought back Bolden, I think, kind of shows that they're not planning on using Rex Burkhead as much as a special teamer as he was early in his career.
I agree with that as well, completely. I think that Burkhead probably will be mostly used on offense. Just looking at that contract, you don't usually pay special teamers $3.15 million. So
especially the Patriots.
I think that you definitely do expect him to play on offense. Before we get out of here, there has been some interesting discussion surrounding Rob Gronkowski about whether there's a double standard, and if a player like, say, Cam Newton would be treated with the kid gloves that Rob Gronkowski is, if he was partying the same way, if he was risking his body at WrestleMania, basically if he acted like Rob Gronkowski. I'm going to take a little bit of a middleman stance on this, where I do think that there's a double standard for Rob Gronkowski, and I do think that other players would be criticized more heavily if they did the same things as Rob Gronkowski. But I don't think that any player should be criticized for doing these things like Rob Gronkowski. They're football players. Who cares if they party? If he got permission to go on WrestleMania, then he can go on WrestleMania. I think that we treat NFL players like they're some like gods or something, and I think that more of them should be treated like Gronk and less. I know that everyone criticizes these players just to get ratings and to get clicks and everything, but it's not fair, and they're human beings, and they should be treated like it.
I agree. And I also think that people forget that early in Gronk's career, he was criticized a whole lot for his partying, especially after the Super Bowl. I believe it was the second one against the Giants, when his ankle was all busted up. They lost that game by 3 points, and there's a video of him dancing at the club right after the game. He was killed for that for an entire summer. I think people have just kind of gotten washed away by the fact that now he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He's a 4-time All-Pro. Everything he's done off the field doesn't affect his production on the field. So I think it's hard to hate on him. Plus, he doesn't get in trouble. Dude likes to have a good time. He likes to party, but he's never gotten in trouble with the law at all. Like, there's never been any kind of unsavory details that have come out about any of his off the field antics. I do agree that there's a double standard. I think that it's mostly idiots on Twitter who, I mean, maybe there's a racial component to some of it, but I agree with you. I think people should be able to, as long as he's getting his job done on the field, as long as he's not getting in trouble, he's not embarrassing the organization, anything like that, let the man live. I mean, he's having a good time.
He's getting hurt on the field. That's the thing. He's not getting hurt off the field. at least from what we know of. And, you know, the injuries that he's had, he does get a lot of criticism in New England. I think from national scope, he doesn't get criticized very heavily. But Patriots fans, you know, have a I don't know what the term is. Something about a trigger finger. But it's, I don't know, sensitive with him. Whenever they see him doing anything, whether it's WrestleMania or anytime he gets injured, Patriots fans will be quick to criticize him. Or at least there's a small group of them who wants to see him traded or wants to see him cut the nonsense. But
I think it's like to a lesser extent what they had in that what I was referring to before about how he was out when he was injured, out partying, whatever. They're like, you're gonna hurt your ankle, you're gonna hurt your back, you're gonna do whatever. I think they still get a little bit of that when you see him end his season on injured reserve after back surgery. Then he's popping around 2 months later. But some of that is warranted. I guess I can understand where people are coming from. They're like, dude, we don't want you to get hurt. Right. Like, you're already hurt. We know you're kind of like, you just seem like a reckless guy, even though like nothing has ever really come of it. But I can understand that to an extent. But I mean, overall, just the partying, just having fun. Some people just need to lighten up.
I agree.
Because everybody, I mean, look at Gronk. I feel like I would be wanting to do the same thing if I was in Rob Gronkowski's position. If I was rich and a fantastic football player that everybody seems to love, you want to have a good time. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree completely. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I don't think that we have anything else on our outline.
This was a decently active week news-wise, which was nice after 2 or 3 that really were next to nothing. No more talking about overtime rule changes and all that nonsense.
If Michaela was here, we might still be talking about.
We probably would. She'd probably want to bring it back up. So yeah, how's the rest of this month? Probably will be pretty slow news-wise if we don't hear anything about Malcolm Butler or any sort of other lower level signings. Yeah, we don't have the draft is still. What is it? 4 weeks away?
3 or 4 weeks away.
So 3 weeks. 3 weeks from tonight is the first night of the NFL draft.
And the Patriots will not be making a pick that day.
Probably will not. That will be a night of where we sit at Gillette Stadium for 3.5 hours and nothing happens. So that'll be good. But so there has been a lot of news about the Patriots working out certain players. They've worked out, I believe. I mean, they work out a ton. They work out 30, 40 players before the draft, so it's hard to read too much into it. But I know that you wrote this morning about how they've worked out a lot of pass rushers, and they obviously need a pass rusher, so that probably insinuates that they're going to draft a pass rusher wherever they do end up landing in that first, second, third, fourth round. So I think that's a pretty good. If you're making your bets on who the Patriots are going to draft, pick an edge rusher. They'll probably end up hitting on one.
Yeah, they've been doing, especially a lot of those guys who are expected to go in the second or third round, like Jordan Willis and. Blanking on a lot of names right now, but I mean, if there's a guy in the Terrell Basham, there's a lot of guys that in that second to third round range, which is basically where they're picking. If they do stick at 72, I would certainly expect them to pick a pass rusher and see who that is. But yeah, we'll be getting to the draft a lot coming up. We'll probably do some specialty shows on some of those positions. So keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots news, and keep it on YouTube.com/NESN for Between the Tackles and for the football words. Special thank you to our director/producer, Courtney Cox, today. He kind of bailed us out, and that'll do it for us.
Yeah, see you Monday.